This mysterious story behind the crying lady in the Dakota is for fans of Halloween movies and everything related to witches or vampires. Ghosts, are they real? Who is the mysterious crying lady in the Dakota, and why is she shrouded in mystery? Is there any basis for this eerie tale? Some of the spirits are harmless, while others are malicious. The following ghost story has long been known to send shivers down people's spines, and many people have felt its fury. Whether you believe in ghosts or not is up to you, but the folks in these anecdotes most definitely will not be laughing off ghost stories anytime soon. One only needs to arrange a vacation to one of these eerie ghost towns to increase the creepy factor. There have been reports of the crying lady in the renowned New York City apartment complex, the Dakota on the East Coast. Save the video for after dark after turning out the lights for a more frightful experience. One of New York City's most upscale apartments is the Dakota building from the 19th century, which is situated on Manhattan's West 72nd Street. It has long been thought that the location is cursed. Here we look at the strange and even tragic incidents connected to this famous and haunting structure. What strange encounters have witnesses had with Dakota's crying lady, and what does it imply about the enigmatic nature of her presence? The Dakota was the first apartment complex designed for the upper class of New York, and a number of famous residents lived there, including Lauren Bacall, Judy Garland, and John Lennon. It also had a ghostly resident among its gorgeous residents, the crying lady. It is said that the crying lady is the ghost of a woman who formerly lived in the Dakota. She lived in one of the apartments on the top floors and was said to be a beautiful and wealthy woman. She was living in an apartment alone for extended periods of time because her affluent business husband was frequently gone on business. She developed serious depression as a result of her growing isolation and loneliness. She threw herself out of her apartment window one day after deciding she could no longer handle it, dying on the pavement below. Her suicide left her husband devastated, and he is reported to have never entirely recovered, carrying the weight of her loss like a cross to bear. Shortly after her passing, unusual events started to occur in the Dakota. Residents were gripped by terror as they reported hearing strange noises, including the sound of wailing that echoed through the haunted corridors of the Dakota. Some reported seeing a woman's spectral form wandering the corridors with her face contorted in sorrow. Like a haunting melody carried on the whispers of the wind, her tale spread through time, and one of New York City's best-known ghost stories was born from it. Meet John, who lived close to the Dakota. His curiosity drew him to the mysterious world of supernatural intrigue, where spooky tales were whispered in dark corners. Fear of the unknown and the peculiar strands of the Dakota's past drove him into the eerie depths of the building. Destiny's hand extended an invitation, guiding him along the winding corridors as the line between the living and the spectral grew thinner. What spine-chilling experiences awaited John within the Dakota's mysterious embrace, where the boundary between the living and the supernatural blurred? John's lifelong interest in the supernatural drove him to the tale of the crying lady. He had heard many stories about the Dakota during his time in New York City, but he had never experienced any strange encounters himself. But one evening, he received an invitation to a gathering at one of the Dakota's apartments, and that is when everything began to shift. John was giddy with excitement, ready to explore the old building and perhaps get a sight of the infamous crying lady. Stepping out of the elevator and crossing the threshold into the apartment, an uncanny chill crept up John's spine. As John entered the flat, a sinister shadow covered his senses, giving the impression that an invisible eye was watching his every move. As the lively party progressed, John engaged in talks with other guests while keeping an eye to catch a glimpse of the infamous ghost. But as the night went on, he began to feel a creeping unease that surrounded him like an invisible blanket and gripped his senses with a shivering sense of fear. His feet guided him to a corner of the apartment where a towering window looked out onto Central Park, while the loud conversation and laughter around him dimmed into a ghostly whisper. John stood there, staring out into the darkness as he became transfixed by the terrifying sound that broke the silence. It was the unmistakable cry of a weeping soul, echoing from somewhere deep within the apartment. Looking around the room, John was puzzled by how the other people were deaf to the haunting cries. As they carried on their chats and laughter, seemingly undisturbed, he could not help but notice the unsettling presence lingering in the air. He felt alone, and as though they were sinking deeper and deeper into madness. But at that very time, the horrifying visage of the crying lady appeared before his eyes, pulling him deeper into the depths of his dread-filled nightmare. John stared in disbelief at the ghostly presence that was occupying the room's corner as he remained there motionless. In the dim light, a long flowy gown appeared to sparkle as the woman's face contorted in a pit of sorrow. Her back was covered in a haunting waterfall of dark flowing hair. She was transparent, but she seemed so real that it attracted him to reach out and touch her. John's eyes remained fixed on the ghostly figure in front of him as he was frozen. The other visitors appeared to be unaware of her presence and continued their conversation. The realization of what he had witnessed sent shivers down his spine, leaving him paralyzed with terror. The crying lady turned with a spooky slowness as John stared in horror. Her somber steps guided her to the apartment's exit. He was compelled by a firm determination to find her and uncover the purpose behind her haunting presence. He entered the empty hallway by pushing past the crowd of partygoers, where a haunting silence hung heavy. However, despite the void, the eerie echoes of her cries continued to come from a distance. John followed the distressing sound, his heart racing, till he came to the end of the passage, his breath quickening with anticipation. A window was open in front of John's eyes, allowing a chilly nighttime breeze to enter the space, and carrying with it the distant glow of city lights. However, nothing else could be seen but the crying lady's ghostly presence. All that could be seen was her haunting silhouette perched on the window ledge. John was able to perceive her agony in her spectral form, as well as the magnitude of her misery and the waves of loneliness and sadness that were engulfing her. He was aware that she had tragically perished by jumping from this window all those years ago, and that she was still trapped here, unable to find solace. As he gently called her name and extended his hand to her, John reassured her that it was okay for her to let go of her worries and find peace. The crying lady then vanished in a flash as brief as her appearance. Only the distant hum of the city could be heard echoing through the empty hallway. John tried to understand the significance of the encounter that had just taken place in front of him, as he stood there, still and reflective. Deep down, he was aware that what he had seen was extraordinary, and that the event would live on in his memory forever. As the curtains fall on John's story, the mysterious presence of the crying lady continues to cast a sinister shadow over the Dakota. Her ethereal existence persists, haunting the corridors and stirring whispers of her sorrowful tale. The myth of the crying lady lives on, intertwined with the haunting history of the building. How did this chilling tale make you feel? Did this story of the crying lady send a shiver down your spine? Remember, the suspense is not over yet. Stay tuned for more thrilling stories to come. After delving into the tale of John, a non-resident of the Dakota, get ready for the next segment featuring the legendary John Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono. Join us as we investigate the mysterious relationship between John Lennon and the Dakota building. Few people could ever expect to match the level of fame and recognition that John Lennon, the legendary singer and songwriter, attained. His melodies have resonated across the globe, stirring souls, and his legacy continues. John Lennon owned 4 apartments in New York City's famous Dakota skyscraper. Lennon and Ono bought an apartment in Dakota in 1973 and moved there. In 1976, they bought 3 more apartments. On the building's 72nd Street side, John and Yoko Ono had a separate entrance. Lennon's 4 flats, which featured a recording studio, a kitchen, and an office, took up the entire 8th level of the structure. Lennon found shelter at the Dakota, which gave him the peace and comfort he required to compose songs. John Lennon was fatally shot outside the building when he was just 40 years old on December 8, 1980. Mark David Chapman shot and murdered him in front of the structure's 72nd Street entrance. The Dakota Hotel in New York City is possibly best known for the assassination of John Lennon. Lennon's bond with the Dakota remained unbreakable even after his death, as his spirit remains eternally connected to the hallowed halls of the iconic building he called home. While John Lennon confronted the chilling presence of the crying woman phantom, brace yourself for the astounding encounter that awaited Yoko Ono within the confines of her own apartment. Can you guess who or what she came face to face with? Prepare to be captivated by the astonishing revelations that lie ahead. John claimed he saw a crying woman phantom prowling the halls when he was alive. In a bizarre twist of fate, the ghost of Lennon is also said to be haunting the Dakota ever since his murder. Witnesses allege that shortly after his murder, they saw him leaning casually against the entrance where he had been shot. He was wearing his signature white flare suit. One witness reported seeing his ghost outside the Dakota's entryway, with an eerie glow about him. Another person wanted to talk to John, but she refrained due to the way he was looking at her. Lennon and Ono remained close until Lennon's passing, despite relocating to different regions of the country in 1973. Ono firmly believes that Lennon's spirit is refusing to leave her side, as if bound by an invisible thread. She frequently sees John's apparition at his white piano while she is at the Dakota. Yoko claims John told her, "Don't be apprehensive, I'm still with you." His ghost allegedly still wanders the complex. Some claim it is because it is where he was killed, but others believe his undying love for his beloved Yoko Ono anchors him to this realm. The former Beatles frontman continues to make his presence known at the Dakota for whatever reason. Many others, including Lennon's relatives, close friends, and former bandmates, claim to have been visited by Lennon in some shape or form. Jessica Jewett, a paranormal researcher, claims that when someone is violently and suddenly murdered, the victim's ghost spirits linger. Are Lennon and the crying lady the only ghostly residents of the Dakota? A little girl's spirit also roams the premises. She frequently stops by, and many people have seen her. She was observed on other floors in addition to the lower floor windows. The girl has blonde hair, is dressed historically, and is occasionally seen bouncing a red ball. Her ghostly figure, often seen waving and grinning at people, goes beyond mere gestures as she utters words. She once disclosed to a neighbor that it was her birthday. In the hallway, painters noticed a girl bouncing a ball with long blonde hair and an older style outfit. They'd never seen her before, and neither the children who lived there nor the visitors' descriptions of her matched. She has also never been identified. Residents still see the young child, welcoming them with a smile and a wave from windows on the ground level. Why does the ghostly apparition of Edward Cabot Clark, the building's developer, haunt the Dakota's dark basement? He may be haunting the building to protect it from other spirits, or to ward off those who interfere with his cherished creation. Clark never lived in the Dakota, which was his dream project, providing a possible explanation for his presence. Who is this mysterious man with the wig, and what drives him to act so ferociously as tossing heavy objects? The most sinister stories in the Dakota building or New York City originate in the basement. A porter once led a renter to the basement area with the goal of demonstrating to them how objects may move strangely on their own. When a big metal bar flew across the room earlier, the porter was inside and came dangerously close to being hit. The two men were looking into these claims while they were in the basement. The porter claimed that once the bar fell at his feet, he went to pick it up, but discovered that it was far too heavy for him to lift. Many have observed a figure in the basement who resembles the building's developer, Edward Cabot Clark. Clark, however, never resided there. Possibly his ghostly hand was pulling the strings from beyond the grave. It is also possible that the man with the wig was none other than Clark himself. This phantom visited an electrician in the basement 4 times in the 1930s. It had a short beard, a big nose, and wire glasses similar to Clark's. Each time, the man glared fiercely at the electrician for several moments, then reached up, snatched off the weight he was wearing, and shook it angrily in the electrician's face. Clark apparently was not too pleased with this electrician tampering with his cherished masterpiece. The Dakota has additional spooky surprises in store for those brave enough to enter its gates, as if encounters with the man in the wig were not unnerving enough. Before Botox was even a thing, construction workers in the 1960s claimed to have seen a weird sight, a man wandering the grounds with the visage of a small child. It appears that the building was also visited by a ghost with the face of a young boy. A construction worker who was working close to the flats reported seeing a figure with the body of a man and the face of a small kid in the 1960s. The workers felt like they were being closely watched by this eerie ghost, despite the fact that it remained silent. After some time, the ghostly apparition with the face of a young boy faded into thin air. We will now examine Judy Holliday's ghostly story. Judy Holliday, a well-known actress, spent her final years at the Dakota. The Smiths acquired her Dakota apartment in 1965, following her passing. To repaint the walls and revarnish the woodwork, they hired 3 men. The men doing work at her apartment felt as though they were being closely observed. Judy probably wanted to monitor the work to make sure it was being done properly at her previous home. Could it be that the spirits of the Dakota were playing tricks on Frederick Weinstein? Frederick Weinstein and his wife, Susanna, resided in the building. Weinstein was returning home one day when he noticed a magnificent crystal chandelier with lights glowing through his living room window, even though none had been there. He observed this from the 72nd Street window, but he lacks chandeliers. He believed Suzanne had installed it as a surprise. He dashed into his apartment, but there was no chandelier when he entered the living room. But on closer examination, he did spot a patched-up set of bolts in the ceiling where a chandelier had previously been suspended. Do you remember Rosemary's Baby, the fantastic 1968 horror film? Recall the residents of Rosemary Woodhouse, her husband, and the unsettling neighbors, the Bramford? Yes, the Dakota was that. Did the eerie atmosphere of the Dakota make it truly terrifying in movies like Rosemary's Baby? The actual Dakota may not be quite as scary as its fictional version. There is still a lot of ghostly history in the building that will keep paranormal enthusiasts up at night. 9 times out of 10, Gothic would be the term you would choose to characterize the Dakota's appearance. It looks like the kind of structure where weird things happen thanks to its gargoyles, spires, and turrets. It is understandable why Rosemary's Baby filmmaker Roman Polanski decided it would be the ideal choice for the apartment complex in his 1967 satanic thriller. The apartment in the movie is called the Bramford, staying loyal to the Ira Levin novel on which the movie is based. But when we see that dark and foreboding symmetry highlighted against the New York cityscape, it is certainly the Dakota. Dakota expertly weaves into the ideas of wealth and familial bliss, masking some rather frightening truths in Rosemary's Baby. It almost seems as though the structure enjoyed its role in a timeless horror film. Except for House of Strangers in 1949, the only other occasion a film crew was let inside, the sequences shot within the Dakota feel eerily threatening. However, Tom Cruise's Vanilla Sky used the building's exterior. Did you notice which structure was featured on the cover of Ira Levin's novel? None other than the iconic Dakota building. An array of peculiar encounters awaited within the confines of the Dakota for those who dared to cross its borders. Residents of Dakota have also reported hearing strange noises, like the faint pitter-patter of tiny footsteps moving through their apartments at strange times. One recurring occurrence in their apartments has been the observation of objects moving on their own, even big stuff like rugs or furniture. In the domain of the unfathomable, mysteries abound, revealing an intriguing hand of invisible forces at work. These stories demonstrate the resilience of the human spirit. Have you ever encountered any supernatural experiences of your own?